Let's continue exploring the universe within art and the art behind commands. I'm your host, OmLedu, and in this video we're going to build a player-specific days alive counter that resets when that player dies, as well as a death counter that will count the number of deaths for each individual player. And you can build one of these without the other. I just combined them into one video because they share some of the same commands. This idea was requested by Rekordsky. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but thank you so much for leaving a comment and a request, so I really hope that you enjoy. But as you can see, I just died, and that resets my days alive counter back down to 0. But it also increases my death count by 1. So with this, we can see how many days each individual player has survived consecutively without dying, and how many deaths each player has. But before we jump into the commands, there are a few things that we need to talk about first to make sure that everything goes smoothly. The first thing is that the day counter is going to need access to the sky because it uses a daylight sensor to count the number of days that has passed. Because of this, you need to protect it with like barrier blocks or something from other players because they could interact with the redstone. So what you could do is teleport yourself really far away before you build this, that way survival players can't find it. Or you could add barrier blocks, or you could have a repeating command that will teleport players away from the platform and send them back to spawn. But regardless of how you defend your platform, it needs to be built inside of a single chunk. So chunk corners are at coordinates that are multiples of 16 and multiples of 16 minus 1. So to find a chunk, you can either use your calculator, chunk base, or some other resource. But once you've found a chunk to build this in, we need to type in /ticking area add circle squiggle 0. This will turn the chunk that you are standing in into a ticking area. Then you can also add a name for this ticking area after the 0 if you want to, but that's totally optional. Now ticking areas are always loaded, so be careful when making a bunch of different ticking areas because you don't want like crazy farms or crazy redstone to just always be active for no reason. So I would highly recommend having your ticking area chunk somewhere where there isn't much going on, like in the middle of the wilderness. But just to demonstrate how exactly this works, I'm going to place down 2 repeating command blocks that say hello and goodbye. The hello is inside of the chunk that we just made into a ticking area, and the goodbye is not inside that ticking area. So as we can see, now that I've flown far enough away, the goodbye stopped playing because it became unloaded. But the hello never stopped playing because it's inside of the ticking area. But now, finally onto the commands. So first off, we need to add a few things to the scoreboard by using /scoreboard objectives add. What you name them does not matter at all, but you can't have any spaces in the name. And the only 2 that will be visible to the players is the days and the deaths, the ones that actually label the scoreboards that the players can see. And if you don't want to use both the day counter and the death counter, only one of the scoreboards is actually shared, so you will just need 3 scoreboards to do days or 3 scoreboards to do deaths. So we just need to add the scoreboards that we want by typing in /scoreboard objectives add, then the name of the scoreboard, and then dummy. And again, what you name these does not matter at all. You can either use my examples or you can come up with your own. But you can always type in /scoreboard objective list to see all of the scoreboards that you have entered. Then to display a scoreboard, we need to type in /scoreboard objectives set display, and below name is when other players are looking at you, it'll be below your name. List is in the pause menu up at the top, and sidebar is displayed on the right-hand side of the screen. So if we type set display sidebar and then choose our deaths scoreboard, that will switch the day counter that we had before to our death counter on the right side of the screen. And then we still have the death counter in our pause menu list because we didn't change that one. Each of these set displays can only have a single scoreboard. So just go ahead and pick where you want the days and or deaths scoreboard to be displayed, either on the side of the screen, in the pause menu list, or above the player's name. The other 3 scoreboards do not need to be displayed, so the alive, count, and day count are just hidden. But now onto the command blocks. The first one is going to be a repeating, unconditional, always active, with a 0 delay, and with this command. What this does is set all players' alive scoreboard to 0, which basically means that they are dead. And exclamation points add the statement not in there, so it says alive equals not 2. The alive scoreboard is how we're going to tell if a player is dead or alive. Now we need chain command blocks coming off of this repeating one, and make sure that all of these arrows are pointing into each other. But the first chain command is a chain unconditional always active 0 delay with this command. So this uses the @e target selector, then specifies players. So this can only target entities, and a player is only an entity when they're alive. So if the players are alive, their alive scoreboard gets switched to 1. But if they're dead, they're not actually an entity on the map, so their alive counter stays at 0. And this second chain has the same settings as the first, but it's only for the day counter. So if you don't want to use the days alive counter, you can just totally ignore this command block. But this one will execute as all players, so it runs this command as if the player is actually running the command. And it only targets players whose alive scoreboard equals 0. So players who are dead, it runs the scoreboard command for that player and resets their day count. So their days alive goes back down to 0. And again, if you don't want the days alive, you don't need that command. Now this one is for the death counter only. So if you don't want the death counter, you don't need this command. And it's exactly the same as the last one we just looked at, except this one adds to your death count rather than resetting your day score, because this one is for your death count. So again, if you don't want a death counter, you don't need the count scoreboard and you don't need this command block. But if you want to have both scoreboards, they need to be in the order that you just saw. So first the player's days reset, and then their death count goes up by 1. Then the final chain command block has the same settings, unconditional always active, no delay, with this command. This command makes sure that their death is only counted a single time and doesn't just keep activating. It also resets their alive counter back to 2, which shows that they have in fact been counted and prepares them to start the whole process all over again. And that's it for the commands that check to see if players are dead. These next ones are to limit the scoreboard's display so that it only displays players who are currently online. These first two are for the deaths scoreboard. It is a repeat unconditional always active with a delay of 50, just to cut down on lag, because it doesn't need to update constantly. With this command that resets the deaths scoreboard. Now remember that the deaths scoreboard is the one that players can see. The count scoreboard is what actually counts how many times each player has died. So this next command block is a chain unconditional always active with a 0 delay with this command that actually sets the deaths scoreboard to each player's death count, or the count scoreboard. So this executes as the players, as if the players are running this command themselves, and it simply updates the visual deaths scoreboard to match the hidden count scoreboard. So whenever a player logs out, they will be removed from the scoreboard, so that if you have tons of players, it's not just like cluttering up the scoreboard. It only will show players who are online. And then these next two are the same thing, except for the days counter instead of the deaths counter. So the repeating command block needs to have like a 50 delay, just to cut down on lag. And you can increase or decrease that delay, it really doesn't matter. A handful of repeating command blocks won't really add to lag, even if they're activating every tick. Just like these don't need to activate every tick, so a delay of 50 is fine. But the chain command block needs no delay, with this command that functions the exact same as the death counter one, except that this one updates the publicly visible days scoreboard with the hidden day count scoreboard for each online player, so that it only displays the scoreboards for the players who are currently online. And of course, you only need the ones that correspond with the scoreboard you're trying to use, either days or deaths or both. Now these next two commands are for new players when they join to give them a score of 0 rather than a blank score. So they are repeating unconditional always active with a delay of like 50, and this command. This is for the deaths scoreboard and just sets the scoreboard to 0 for that player if they don't have a score already. The two periods after the 0 stand for equal to or more than. So this activates unless the player has a score of 0 or more. If they have a score of less than that, or blank, it just sets their score to 0. So again, if you're not using the death counter, you don't need this command. Or if you're not using the day counter, you don't need this command. But same way, it's a repeat unconditional always active with a delay of 50, with the exact same command as the deaths one, except that this targets the day count scoreboard rather than the count scoreboard. So this sets their days alive to 0 when they join the world. But finally, onto the one that counts the number of days that you have been alive. So we have a daylight sensor set to day mode, a comparator looking at that going into the command block, then a lever with a dust going into the side of the comparator. And this command block is set to impulse, unconditional, needs redstone, with a 0 delay. And the following command to add 1 to all players' day count whenever it is activated. So again, this executes as each player, as if they're running the command themselves, targets themselves and increases their day count by 1. And because of the way we have the redstone on the daylight sensor, this command block will activate once a day at noon. So when the sun is at its highest point in the sky, this will activate and add 1 to all players' score. This will take into consideration sleeping, because you could use game ticks to count how long a player has been alive, but that would be playtime and not actually days alive. But if you do want a playtime scoreboard, either one that resets upon death or that just keeps counting the number of hours that you've played on the world, I can totally do that for you. Just let me know down in the comments. And if commands are ever giving you any trouble, just let me know what the error message says and I will help you fix it. And if you're using a command block, make sure that Show Previous Output is turned on. It won't provide you with any feedback or error messages if you don't have that toggle turned on. But that's all we got for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, share, and subscribe, and be sure to leave a comment. Let me know what you did or didn't like, and if you have any questions or requests, I will do my best to help you out. I look forward to hearing what you have to say, and I hope to see you again soon. But until then, I've been your host, OmLedu, sharing some fancy commands with you, and reminding you, as always, don't forget to have fun. Bye-bye!